Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Schweitzer, and welcome to CBIA's webinar on what every business should know about cybersecurity. Very pleased to have Jeff Ziplow, a partner with Bloom Shapiro Consulting, as the presenter. He has a rich experience and knowledge in this area. A bit more about that in a moment. First, for those of you who might be from outside of Connecticut or not familiar with CBIA, we are the state's largest employer association, and we offer services to member companies in a wide range of areas, including consulting, education on human resource issues, safety and business management issues, representation in Hartford at the state capitol. We lobby with public officials to promote a strong business and growth climate in the state, and we've successfully administered a large group insurance program, essentially a private exchange, since 1995. My role as HR counsel is to work with companies on human resource issues and educate them about the wide range of matters that come up there, and it does occasionally drift into security, information security issues and things like that. So I'm very interested in listening to what Jeff has to say today. We do appreciate Bloom Shapiro's support of this program. It's what makes it possible. A bit of housekeeping for today's webinar. The format will be a slide presentation on your screen with voiceover commentary from Jeff. We also have the capability of real-time Q&A using the text box on the lower right-hand panel of the screen that you have there. It says Q&A. If you have a question, you can type it in there and direct it to us. We are interested in hearing your questions as they arise. We may hold off slightly in responding if it's not relevant to the immediate issue that Jeff is addressing. But I do think we should be able to get to all questions that attendees may have. And we should also have a little bit of additional time at the end as well to pick up on any that we may have missed during the session. Today's session will be recorded, and so within a few days you should get an email from us at CBIA with a link so that you can listen to the content again and possibly share it with some of your colleagues in your organizations. We have a good representation of individuals from a variety of professional disciplines in attendance this morning, so hopefully they'll bring those perspectives and maybe raise some good questions to hear what's on your minds. Jeff Ziplow is a partner in Bloom Shapiro's consulting group based in West Hartford. Jeff's responsible for the firm's risk management and process controls practice areas. He has significant experience working with organizations to assess their internal IT controls as they relate to business operations and helps to develop recommendations to mitigate risk. Jeff's participated on a number of cybersecurity risk assessments and has provided insight and guidance on developing better security practices, working with municipalities, not-for-profits, and public companies. Jeff also works with Connecticut's Office of the Attorney General to provide guidance and support on cybersecurity matters. He has written a number of recent articles on these issues and is a member of a number of professional organizations, including the Information Systems Audit and Control Association and the Government Finance Officers Association of Connecticut. And he also has several professional certifications in the field as a certified information systems auditor, and he's certified in governance of enterprise IT. Jeff has a bachelor's degree from the University of Vermont and an MBA degree from Boston College. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff for the next 45 or 50 minutes to go through the materials, and hopefully we'll get some exchange or interaction with the attorneys as well. So welcome, everyone, and welcome to Jeff.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you very much, Mark, for that kind introduction. So what I'd like to do today is walk you through, over the next 50 minutes or so, what's going on within the cybersecurity arena. Certainly go through trends and statistics, information that I've been able to obtain, just to kind of have you understand where we are. And let me just be very bold in my statement right now. We're in a pandemic as it relates to cybersecurity. I want to talk about the impact of the data breach, emerging risks. Hold on, I'm just moving our slide forward. Sorry about that. Talk about threats, and certainly have some discussion about best practices. One of the things that I need to review with you is, the cyber landscape. So, as you're all probably aware, hackers stole the credit cards information of about 700 million customers from Target in 2013. In 2014, Home Depot had another 56 million credit cards stolen from them. We've heard about the 80 million accounts, social security numbers stolen from Anthem. eBay suffered an intrusion that had 145 million records compromised. I don't think anyone couldn't have noticed most recently, within the past week or so, Yahoo announced that there was 500 million user accounts stolen. Although they did mention the breach occurred in 2014, they have confirmed that information stolen does include names, email addresses, date of birth, and in some cases unencrypted security questions, which is that two-form authentication factor where they'll ask you, what's your favorite color or your favorite dog, which is very concerning. So with the numbers and the organizations that I've kind of highlighted, certainly why is it important for small businesses to be concerned? Because they really need to be. We see that while large companies can afford more expensive in-house systems and possibly hire additional resources, i.e. personnel for protection, many of the smaller companies lack those resources and to some degree even awareness to how to better secure themselves. And that ultimately leaves, some of the smaller organizations more vulnerable to attack. And ironically, when you think about it, the smaller companies have more to lose, if you will, if a cybercrime does occur and could have a more debilitating effect on their overall business. I was doing some research, and the Department of Homeland Security is prioritizing cybersecurity efforts in supporting small and medium-sized businesses. They recognize the same type of issues that, like their larger counterparts, small and medium businesses frequently house, very sensitive personal data and have a lot of proprietary and financial information as well. Small to medium businesses are also becoming larger or bigger targets for cyber criminals because they recognize that some of the smaller businesses may be easier to penetrate because they lack some of the institutional knowledge and resources of the larger companies. So, for me, and working with the CBIA, understanding the cyber threats and being able to address them is extremely important. So my goal for this webinar is to certainly raise the awareness of the threat and potential impact that a breach could have on various companies. Certainly provide some general information on the threats, and hopefully provide you with some insight on what you can do to reduce the likelihood and impact of a breach on your end. So let's start with some trends and statistics. And I'm not going to go through all of this in tremendous detail, but some of this information is pretty interesting. We're spending a lot of money on cybersecurity, $77 billion in 2015. The 50% of employees steal proprietary corporate data when they quit or are fired. Ransomware is becoming rampant, and ransomware is when you either click on a link or you get a virus downloaded to your computer, and it actually encrypts all the information. And what happens is the cyber attackers hold your systems or hold your data at ransom for ransom. And until you pay them a ransom, you won't get the encryption key. And we'll get into more details about that. One of the things that I am finding is that for those of you that have boards, the topic of cybersecurity is on most board members' topics of discussion. And, you know, the fact here that 80% of board members are discussing cybersecurity in board meetings, you know, certainly raises the awareness of, you know, the issue, and that we need to start thinking about this differently. This is not an IT problem. IT can certainly help to some extent, but it's broader and bigger than that. Some industries that have some of the highest incident rates, you can see the differences between 2014 and 2015. We are seeing, you know, healthcare as a big area because they certainly capture or have a lot of information. Some of you might question manufacturing and why that is so high. One of the reasons is because they have IP, intellectual property, that can be stolen and actually has been stolen by the cyber attackers. And so those are things that need to be addressed. And on the manufacturing side, you know, we're giving away some of our trade secrets through these cyber attacks, and certainly has an impact, you know, on many different organizations. On the next slide, you can see some other trends. The one that struck me is, you know, nearly, and it's probably over this number, but 1 million pieces of malware, which that's computer viruses or other type of malicious software, are released every day. So we're being bombarded between emails, going on websites, but having those websites compromised, that malicious software might be loaded onto our computers. We're being bombarded by a tremendous amount of malware on a daily basis, and that's only going to increase. The next item below that, you know, hackers spend 200 days inside of a network before discovery. I mentioned earlier about, you know, the Yahoo attack, and that breach actually occurred in 2014. I've been in situations in working with the Attorney General's office where hackers have been in place, have been siphoning off information from, you know, a company's database, or have been in the doors of their network for, you know, 3 or 4 years. So it doesn't just happen overnight. It doesn't typically happen over the course of a week or a month, or even a year. It can span multiple years. And we need to be very aware of this. And again, I mentioned the word pandemic. We are in pandemic mode. We need to have better controls and better security practices for the most part to attack this problem. And lastly, most organizations are unprepared for cybersecurity incidents, and that is troubling as well. You know, think yourself, what would you do if you realized or recognized that there was a cyber attack going on? First question is, how would you know? The second question is, okay, now that I know, what am I going to do? And those are the types of things that you want to think about and be prepared for in advance. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. So one of the key things that you'll see or learn is that, you know, hackers are very interested in, obviously, data. And I put out on this slide some areas that, you know, we'll just go into briefly about the type of data that, you know, hackers are looking at. Certainly personal data. So if you have credit card information, I put PCI stands for payment card industry. So I'm hoping that none of you hold on to credit card numbers on premise. Under the PCI compliance standard, that's a big no-no. Even if it's in hard copy, you shouldn't be holding on to credit card numbers at all. We have a wealth of Social Security numbers, and most businesses have Social Security numbers. The reason a lot of times a hacker or an attacker wants Social Security numbers is you can start up a credit card, you can start up, initiate a new loan if you have, Social Security number and other relevant information, name, date of birth, so on and so forth. Passport numbers, some organizations hold, and, there's no doubt that we have a lot of health information, HIPAA and PII. For the private company, you may have sales information, financial statements, information that, you really don't want to share with anyone. And certainly that's important to make sure that it's maintained within your perimeter. And unfortunately, our perimeters are becoming fluid-like, and, we got to make sure that those perimeters are, as the best we can make them, impenetrable. I mentioned earlier about the intellectual property and certainly on the manufacturing side. So there have been instances, and actually I've been recently involved in a couple of instances where hackers have been able to get in and schematics and other intellectual property information has been stolen from the organization, and that certainly has a dramatic impact, on not only the company, but depending on the type of manufacturer you are. If you're manufacturing proprietary parts for aerospace, there's some issues there that you need to think about. And if you're working with UTC, you may need to contact UTC and make them aware of what's been going on, and certainly that's not going to sit too well with them. Supplier data, contract terms and costs, banking information is certainly out there. If any of you have donors who provide donor information, again, storing that credit card information, is not a good thing. So what I'd like to share with you is a little bit about, what happens if there is a data breach. There are a number of issues. One is a reputational risk. If you do get breached, what happens to your company, your organization's reputation? Certainly there's damage to your brand, negative publicity, could result. You'll certainly be in the paper because if there is a data breach, chances are, and we'll get into some of the Connecticut, the privacy requirements for the state of Connecticut, but it's not going to be private anymore. You're going to have to tell the Attorney General's office, Connecticut's Attorney General's office, and make them aware of what the situation is, and we'll get into more details in a minute. And it also has an impact on your employees and how your employees are working with you. It could have, if some of their personal information was compromised, certainly doesn't leave a very good taste in their mouth, about that to them. There's some regulatory responses. So if you are dealing with PCI, which is the payment card information, you're going to have to deal with, the credit card companies. If you get into HIPAA, we'll have to deal with the HIPAA police that are out there. And then ultimately there could be a financial loss. And that financial loss could be a result of fines, your loss of intellectual property, some type of legal liability requirements, and damages, to customers. And certainly that's nothing that we want to have happen to any of our businesses in any way, shape, or form. Just wanted to share with you some of what the legal landscape has looked like. And it goes back, to the 1990s, so to speak, where in 1974, we have this Privacy Act that got kicked off. 1996 is the famous Healthcare Portability Act, which started HIPAA. You'll notice in 2006, which is the PCI DSS, again, payment card industry. Payment card industry has a standard, and it was established actually by the credit card companies because they needed and wanted to enhance security protocols for folks that use credit cards, businesses that use credit cards, because, certainly they were on the hook for significant losses as it relates to breaches surrounding credit cards, and they wanted to put in place better practices that people follow. And so in 2006, they started the process, and they every year or every other year come up with bigger and broader standards. And if you haven't already, there's something called a self-assessment questionnaire that your financial institution that handles your credit card information may ask you to fill out. And in that questionnaire, there's a significant amount of security information. There are a number of different questionnaires, and depending on, and here's the key question, do you store credit cards on site, or do you process credit cards through your network on site? And if those two things are true, the self-assessment questionnaire tends to be extremely lengthy. There are different self-assessment questionnaires that could be filled out, but just be prepared. Again, in 2009, we had a HIPAA high-tech update, and so we're ratcheting down or ratcheting up the security that needs to take place as it relates to healthcare. Massachusetts in 2010 put together what I would consider a pretty significant privacy law for Massachusetts, and I won't get into all the details because you might not be interested in Massachusetts, but they have one of the better ones out there. 2015, the Obama administration has put together some breach notification. I will share with you, in my opinion, the federal government is woefully behind in really putting federal type of standards in place that have a broad range of impacts. But I guess a piece that you don't see on there is in 2015, for the state of Connecticut, the governor signed into law, it's called an Act Improving Data Security and Agency Effectiveness, which actually took place or became effective October 1st of 2015. And so as part of that new law, and I'm not sure if you're all aware of this, but as part of that new law, you're forced to report a data breach within 90 days. Before it was a little bit vague, but if you have a data breach, it has to be reported, and there's a hard deadline within 90 days. In a number of cases, if you do have a data breach, you, the business, are going to have to provide a year of free identity theft prevention services for each person whose data was breached. There's some new and specific data security program requirements on health insurance companies and other entities subject to the insurance department regulations within the state of Connecticut. And then this law that took effect to improve data security does require state agencies to improve certain security requirements on contractors working with the state that maintain personal information. There's some other elements to this. Starting in October 1st of 2017, again, this is more specific to health insurers, pharmacy, benefits managers, and other entities regulated by the Connecticut Insurance Department, but they have to have and maintain a comprehensive information security program. Having said that, most of these types of organizations would already have this security program in place as it relates to HIPAA. But as you can see, Connecticut is very serious about data security and protecting its citizens, and it's only going to get worse, or there's going to be more tightening, if you will, of requirements within the state of Connecticut. So let's talk about some of the emerging risks. As you can see here, we're using the cloud, or many organizations are using the cloud. They're using it in a number of ways. So SaaS stands for Software as a Service. PaaS stands for Platform as a Service. I'm not sure how I want to pronounce the next one, but the next one is Infrastructure as a Service. I was going to say IaaS, but it didn't sound very good to me. In any case, we are using the cloud. Many organizations recognize that, the cloud can, in some ways, the cloud can enhance security, but we also have to be aware of what it can also, cause as well. And part of this is, what does your cloud provider provide to you as it relates to security? Is it spelled out in your contract? I think it's really important to understand what data is in the cloud. Is it PI or personal information related? Are there social security numbers? Are there date of birth information? What are we storing in the cloud? A key component is, if this provider fails, what happens? What happens to the data? How do we get it back? How do we validate that they've deleted or eradicated, if you will, all that proprietary information that we have? And then, how do we confirm all of this? Do we audit it ourselves as a business, or can we rely on someone else going in and auditing it? I bring these up for discussion not because I don't believe in the cloud. Actually, it's the reverse. I think the cloud can help enhance security in many different ways, but we have to do so with some clear understanding of some of these key areas, and it should be identified up front in your contract. And so, another food for thought is, what happens if the cloud vendor gets compromised? Who owns the responsibility of reporting? Who owns the financial loss that could potentially occur? Those types of items need to be confirmed in a contract so that everyone understands the expectations, and equally important, as a business owner, you're comfortable with that the cloud vendor is certainly responsible for, a good chunk of the risks. Jeff?
This is Mark. In your experience, how many vendors are taking the initiative to provide this? Can companies sit back and think, well, they're being responsible providers, or do I really need to raise the issue and explicitly put it on the table and ask them?
I think that certainly it depends on the provider. It's worth asking the question no matter who the provider is. I would tell you that if you're working with an Amazon or the Amazon cloud, or the Google cloud or the Microsoft cloud, certainly it's a good question to ask, and you want to know what the expectations are and what the rules are, if you will, and what happens if you Amazon or you Google get compromised. What happens to my data, and who's responsible? And because you're going to be setting expectations. So I think that's good information to have. There's some compliance standards out there called a SOC 1 or a SOC 2 when it relates to service organizations, and those are independent audits, if you will, of these service organizations that are providing services to you. And those independent audits can give you some comfort, assuming that they're occurring, that the organization is doing what they said they're going to do. But, you know, from my perspective, Mark, I certainly believe that it's a good question to ask, and making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed are very important.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's talk about another emerging risk area, and we've probably heard a lot about it, but that's mobile. We've got a lot of risks associated, you know, with mobile devices, and I think what we're seeing is a couple of things. One, our mobile devices are becoming very close to, and there's a very gray area in my mobile device compared to my computer. I'm able to store a tremendous amount of information on my mobile device. I'm able to do a lot of things with my mobile device. I can actually go into a computer system with my mobile device. And therein lies some of the problems. When I'm connecting up with my mobile device to a network other than, you know, my phone carrier, is it a secure wireless access point? Should it be a trusted, you know, environment? Those are things that we really need to start thinking about, because it's my belief that mobile is going to become harder and harder to control, and we got to put some control in there. And don't forget, we send a wealth of information. We send a wealth of information through email, and most people have emails and their attachments on the phone. And if a phone gets stolen, you know, what happens to that information? And I say to all of my clients, if you have employees who are downloading email, you know, company email for their phones, you should have a policy in place, and you can call it a BYOD, bring your own device policy, or even if it's a company phone, you want to have the ability to wipe that phone, to literally delete everything on that phone in case, you know, the phone gets stolen. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that none of the information on that phone is retrievable, because as we know, on that phone I might have emails, I might have passwords that allow access into various systems. And believe it or not, I can see everyone smiling through the phone, through the conference call, because we all know that we have it on our phones. Some of us won't readily admit it, but we need to work to protect those phones. I will share with you that, and I can only speak for the iPhone right now, but if you have a password on the iPhone, and I certainly encourage everyone to have a password on your iPhone. If you do have a password on your iPhone is now encrypted, and as we saw this past year, it takes an act of God, and sometimes that doesn't even work, to unencrypt an iPhone. So just some food for thought. But again, we need to really understand that mobile environment. So let me tell you what we're seeing. And I'm going to concentrate on 5 areas here, and I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. Hacking. This is when someone is, you know, exploiting a weakness in a computer system or a network, and they're able to find a network door open, not a physical one, but a logical one, and kind of get into your network and start moving around. And one of the reasons that hackers spend, you know, more than a day, a week, month, year, 2 years, is because they're actually going around and looking for where all the information is. And once they get in the door, they're able to push and prod different databases, other servers, and other information to really figure out what they have. A keylogger is a piece of software that gets installed on your PC. It can happen either from clicking on a link in a website or clicking on an email link. and that keylogger actually gets downloaded to your PC unbeknownst to you. And what happens is that it starts tracking your keystrokes. So it will track what you're typing. So if you go out to any type of financial institution, it will track the website URL. It'll track, the password information and user information that you put into that website. And it'll certainly capture if you're using, those challenge questions, what's the name of your dog or what's your favorite color. It'll track all of that. It tracks anything that you put into a keyboard or type into a keyboard. And ultimately what happens is that information gets transmitted out via the internet to the hacker site. It probably gets bounced around from site to site and then ultimately lands to the hacker. So they now have key information on how to get into your system. The next one down is lightjacking. I didn't realize this, but when you go out to the websites, you'll see that little smiley face on a website, and it's really cute. And if you like this website, click on that. Well, that's what lightjacking is. Some of them are real, and you like it, and clicking on it is good. Some of it is not real, and when you click on it, you could end up downloading a keylogger or some other type of malware to your PC. Ransomware, we talked a little bit about, but that's where software gets downloaded to your PCs via an email. I've seen it mostly through emails actually, and you clicked on a link, and lo and behold, it literally encrypts your computer. But then, if you're on a network, it'll encrypt all the network drives that you have access to, and it does so very, very quickly. And you won't know about it initially, but I'll show you in a minute how you will know. The last item here is phishing. We've probably all seen it, where you're getting a phishing email. Spear phishing is a directed email at a particular person. I'll show you an example of just phishing, but spear phishing is when you get an email asking Jeff Ziplo for money, and it sounds just like, the other person requesting the money would ask for. I had a situation actually this year, it occurred in April, where a construction company that we were working with had a situation where they received a phishing email, and it sounded just like the person where the email was coming from. It was, coming from the CEO, and all the attributes made sense. They were asking for, I think it was $15,000, something like that he needed to be sent out, and they actually went through and initiated the transaction, although the good news is that they realized this happened as the person was in his car. I'm sure he wasn't driving at the time, he was looking at the email, but when he got back, he realized that the email didn't look right, and was able to call up the bank and cancel the wire transfer. But it does happen, and sometimes it's very, very believable. So to just share with you a couple of things regarding this. Why is it happening on the hacking side? A lot of software isn't being patched on a regular basis. We lack password rotations or complexity. Keylogger side, we don't have up-to-date antivirus or malware, or it's not working. Even though we've loaded computers and we believe that antivirus software is on all our computers, one of the things I will share with you in doing security assessments is we go around and we'll test a random sample. Undoubtedly, there's it's a small number, but it only takes one, a 2 to 5% where the antivirus software is on the machine, but it hasn't been updated for whatever reason in 6 months, 9 months, even, a couple of years. So, we need to figure that one out. Ransomware is the same way. Phishing is a combination of firewall and user education. We need to do a better job, on the user side. So let me share with you a couple of things. These are two dates that probably don't mean much to you folks on the conference call, but have a significant impact from a security perspective. So April 8th, 2014 is when Microsoft basically, said that we're no longer providing any type of security patches for Windows XP. And so Windows XP was an operating system that was very prevalent and, a lot of people had. And people were really fighting moving off of XP. But so there haven't been any security patches since April 8th, 2014. I'm hoping there's no one on this call that still has XP, because you need to be very careful, because there are security exploits out there for XP. July 13th, 2015 is another key date. Microsoft did the same thing, but they did it with Windows 2003. So Windows 2003, as of July 14th, 2015, does not have any security updates and patches, and there are issues and ways to exploit Windows 2003 that hackers can take advantage of. I actually personally know a couple of organizations that are still using 2003, and they're just putting themselves at risk. And certainly I'm sharing that with you, so hopefully none of you have those products or are using XP or Windows 2003 currently. Let me show you a screen. This is a screen you never want to see. This screen represents one of the ransomware variants that is out there. It's the CryptoLocker. We've seen a tremendous amount of ransomware out there. So as I mentioned earlier, your information gets encrypted, and then the PC that initiated the encryption procedures, if you will, gets a screen like this. And there are a couple other variants, but most of them come up with a screen and it says, hey, all your personal files are encrypted, and we have the key to the kingdom. And if you want the keys to the kingdom, you need to send us money. As you can see here, they're asking for $300. Now, it's $300, but we're not going to give them cash. We need to pay them in Bitcoin. And so therein lies another challenge. I'm not sure if any of you have had to pay things in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a financial instrument that is untraceable. So that's one good thing for the hackers. Bitcoin is a whole other topic for a whole other day, but just to share with you, what they're doing here is they're asking for payment, they're asking for it in Bitcoin, and they're basically telling you have a couple of days to respond, or else the key is going to be destroyed. So you will not be able to get your information back. Now, this is where having a good backup procedure and process in place can really save an organization. So the way and the workaround, particularly for those network drives that were compromised by ransomware, you can do a full and complete restore, and that will take care of your problem. You need to make sure, though, that the ransomware virus is removed from the computer, or you'll just reinfect yourself. I have seen a new variant of the ransomware virus that actually propagates itself from one computer to, once it's in a computer, it will propagate itself to another computer and yet to another computer, which certainly is not they're just going to get more money from you based on that. But ransomware is it's an awful virus, and I would make sure that you have really, really good backup available to you. The next screen is my example of phishing. And So you'll see a couple of things with this phishing example. One is, spelling, and you'll see below is not spelled right. You will see typically in a phishing exercise where it links to, a known email. That email looks appropriate because we see the word Facebook in there, but if you look behind the scenes, it's going to some other place. There will typically be a threat, and, a lot of the phishing comes where it's being displayed by a company that you are well known or you know quite well, in this case Facebook. But this is a true life phishing example. Just to share with you a brief story about phishing, we went on a phishing expedition for a particular company. We were working with the IT department only, and they asked us to go through and actually send an email to all employees requesting their user IDs and passwords. And so we created a fictitious email. It looked exactly like an email that would have been sent in the company. We said that it was coming from an intern that was just starting to work for this organization, and we requested them to click on this link, which redirected them to a website where they could enter in their user ID and passwords. There were 150 people in this organization. There was 20% hit rate of people that actually responded to, clicked on the link and actually entered in user ID and password information. So the reason I share that story with you is really for this next slide, and I'll hit you with the highlight. If you look at the last 3 bullet points, people, it's really important that people understand their role in cybersecurity and how they can effectively help and enhance, the security within an organization. A couple of other things, identified on the slide. Not updating or patching software, which and operating systems is a problem. We need to do it on a regular basis. Password rotation and complexity. We mentioned antivirus before. We talked about backup and testing of the backup. And I would say at this point, most organizations are not going through a formal training or education program with their employees to expose them, one, to cybersecurity, and the second is to help them understand their role in protecting the organization. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So we talked a bit about passwords. If your password is on this list, I will share with you right now that it's probably not a good password. We really need to implement complex passwords within all organizations. If you don't have complex passwords or you don't know what they are, it's using a combination, and I would say a minimum of 8 characters, and those 8 characters need to be a combination of uppercase, lowercase, letters, numbers, and special characters. So it's got to be a combination of all of them. I shared with you, and please, if you're not a New England Patriots fan, I apologize, but you really should be. Just a joke. In any case, how I would create a complex password. So you create a phrase, and I know that passwords need to change on a regular basis, so that number can be incremented, fairly easily. So if you see, what I have here, that 11 number corresponds to the month that I'm in. So this is not my password, by the way, but I did want to share that with you. And then we have two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication is going to become more and more prevalent. We see a lot of it when we're dealing with many of the websites now, particularly financial institutions, where they're asking you for, not only user ID and password, but your favorite color, your favorite animal, where you were born. They'll ask you multiple questions, and that enhances, the security parameters, and two-factor authentication is certainly a way that I think will be implemented within most organizations in the next couple of years if it's not already there. Just some general findings. Going back to the cloud, we should be asking those cloud vendors, who's responsible for security, and it should be laid out in the contract, and then a confirmation of who owns the data. I mentioned earlier about a SOC 1 or SOC 2. Those are standards by the ICPA. There's a couple of other standards out there. There's an ISO standard out there that does something very similar to a SOC 2, Service Organization Control 2. A Type 2 is an actual testing of the controls. Longer story for another day, but certainly we want to have these conversations, with the cloud vendors. So let me go through my top 10 list, and I know we're starting to run out of time, but we'll finish on time. I started off the presentation by sharing with you that this is not just an IT issue, that cybersecurity needs to be looked at from the top down, from the directors, from the presidents, CEOs, board members. They need to understand the impact of cybersecurity on their organization. They also need to look at this from an enterprise risk management perspective and understand, half the battle is understanding what information do you have that is protected or needs to be protected. Is that information encrypted? There's going to be a very different story when you go to the Connecticut Attorney General's office and you say, gee, my computer, I had a laptop stolen. It may have had personal information on it, but my entire laptop was encrypted. That's a very different type of discussion with the Attorney General's office versus I had a laptop stolen. There may have been personal information on it, and we're going to have to figure out what comes next. I've worked with Attorney General Fitzsimmons on a number of matters, and there's a very different response with encrypted data versus non-encrypted data. Cybersecurity does need to be, and the attributes or the security aspects of cybersecurity need to be socialized throughout the organization. It needs to have more visibility, and there needs to be a tone from the top. Performing a cybersecurity risk assessment, I think, is important. There's an organization out there called NIST, N-I-S-T, that's identified on the slide. They actually have a very good framework that you can take a look at. They have some tools and protocols that you can use if you want to do it on your own. So that's something that's important. I mentioned earlier about knowing where your protected information is stored. Enforcing password changes. I do believe in it. I think you need to have an minimum of 8-character complex that changes every 90 days. Users should be locked out after 3 unsuccessful attempts. And the reason for that is very simple. If someone's attempting to log into a computer and their account is locked out after 3 attempts, then it's going to start raising a red flag. Well, why is this person's account continuing to be locked up? And that could certainly be a sign of a cyber attack. That's the flip side to that, and unfortunately I've seen a lot of organizations where after a certain number of unsuccessful attempts, they lock out the account, but they'll lock it out for 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes, it gets reset, and a hacker can try again. reality of the situation is a lot of times hackers are hacking in, during the wee hours of the night. And so, they'll wait 30 minutes and try again. And frankly, most people won't know, the difference. If you have the opportunity, I would certainly implement two-factor authentication because it really does help and make a big difference. Look at and see, take a look at your network permissions and make sure that you don't have access to too much data or try to restrict the data just in case you get a ransomware type of virus. That could help you. I mentioned earlier about backup and recovery. It's really important to make sure that your backup is effective and it's working properly. I can tell you horror stories where, they needed to, an organization needed to restore information, and unfortunately, they realized their backup was not good. We talked about antivirus. Make sure it's working. We talked about the cloud vendors. It is important to have security policies and procedures in place, and ensure that everyone understands their role, and sign off on those security policies and procedures. We mentioned encrypting laptops and all removable devices. Our cell phones should have passwords on them, and they should be able to be wiped if it's stolen or compromised. And then we want to encrypt our laptops. And the last one, and I can't stress this enough, we need to provide cybersecurity training to our employees and get them up to speed on what they should be doing to protect the organization and what they shouldn't be doing that puts the organization at risk. So with that, Mark, I think we're in good shape. I don't know if there's any more questions.
Right on time. We had someone submit wasn't really a question, but rather a comment, just indicating that when you were on the slide on the crypto locker, the ransomware, that just indicated they had that happened to them, and the comments was it was horrible. Yeah.
So it really is getting a ransomware virus. It's horrible. And as I mentioned earlier, it's even worse because I think they're morphing into a situation where once you get it on one PC, it then kind of distributes itself across your network, and it's awful. So
learn by others' experiences. So
absolutely.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, we're going to call it a day. Jeff, this was fascinating for someone, from the human resource area. I see the need to draw in, as you're saying, everyone in the organization, because they're all involved. Everyone is connected these days. Even, on the shop floor, people are using computers for controlling their systems, and many times you're tapped into, outside networks as well. Right. So it really does require that broad outreach to pull everyone in. One other comment followed up on that was our IT support rescued our data recovery work, but they lost a day or so. That's probably the best can be hoped for outcome.
That's really not too bad.
Yeah, right.
The other thing is, if you do have a ransomware virus, unplug your computer from the network as soon as possible. Don't turn it off, but unplug it. So.
Right. Jeff, if you can just flip to the next slide, that final one, I did want to emphasize that your contact information is here, and if any folks have any further questions after this morning's session, or would like to call upon Jeff to assist with some specific information, certainly available. There's his phone number and his email address. Question here, can we share these slides? Can people share these slides once we send them out?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Very good. Well, thank you very much. This was fascinating, somewhat distressing, but with at least the guidance on where to go to avoid some of these types of problems and how the big picture of the structure. So But otherwise, thank you very much, Jeff, and to Bloom Shapiro for their support of CBIA's efforts with getting the word out.